The scream came from the one voice Dominic Blackwell trusted more than his own instincts. "Stop! Don't turn it on!" He froze, hand inches from the ignition, when he saw her. Alara, small, barefoot, running across the driveway with terror in her eyes. For a man feared by cities, hunted by rivals, and untouchable for decades, fear had never sounded like that before. Seconds later, the truth emerged, a bomb hidden beneath his SUV. Sophisticated, precise, planted by someone inside his empire. Dominic had survived wars, betrayals, and assassinations, but this was different. Because this time, the danger didn't come from the streets. It came from his own house, and it almost took his daughter with it. As the compound locked down and trust began to fracture, Dominic realized something far more terrifying than death. The people closest to him might already be plotting his end, and the only reason he was still alive was a little girl who overheard the wrong conversation and chose to run toward danger instead of away from it. What followed wasn't just a hunt for a traitor. It was a reckoning between power and loyalty, ambition and conscience, and a father forced to confront the cost of the empire he built. If you're hooked, stay with me till the very end of the story. Don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. I've got so many incredible stories coming your way, and you definitely don't want to miss any of them. Alright, let's get back to the story. Alara had been chasing sunlight across the compound's manicured lawn, her small sneakers sliding in dew-soaked grass, when a faint voice drifted from the garage. She froze, ears straining, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. Dominic's world was supposed to be untouchable. Nothing dangerous ever crept close enough to threaten him, or her. But this voice carried a weight she couldn't ignore. He'll never see it coming. When the engine starts, won't survive, finally mine. Her stomach knotted, heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst through her ribs. The words were fragmented, unclear, but the danger behind them was unmistakable. Engine, won't survive, finally mine, she whispered under her breath, piecing together the puzzle of menace she barely understood. Every nerve in her body screamed to act. Alara crept closer, pressing herself against the shadowed wall of the garage. The metallic scent of oil and gasoline filled her nostrils, but beneath it lurked something darker, something deliberate. She saw Marcus's figure move along the sleek black SUV, gestures casual yet calculated, his presence twisting the ordinary into something sinister. How could anyone inside their home want to hurt Papa? Dominic Blackwell was the unshakable, untouchable force she had always known. And yet, in this moment, she felt fear deeper than any bedtime shadow. Her mind wandered to stolen moments with her father. The rare smile when he returned from meetings, the soft press of his hand in hers, the way he read bedtime stories with a gentleness that contradicted the ferocity she had been told he commanded in the outside world. Dominic was her protector, the world's monster tamed for her alone. But walls, even walls built by someone as powerful as Papa, could be breached. Protection was no guarantee. It required action, knowledge, awareness. Clutching the hem of her dress, Alara squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, drawing courage from the memory of his presence. She did not understand the intricacies of bombs or betrayals, but she understood enough. Her father could die if she stayed silent. She had to move. Every second counted. Every heartbeat brought the engine, the ignition, the unimaginable closer. Rising, hair damp from dew and tangled from running, she whispered a plea that barely reached her own ears. "Please, Papa, don't turn it on." Her tiny legs carried her across the yard, arms pumping with urgency, the morning sunlight now a blur around her. She could hear the distant scrape of a door, the faint creak of the garage, each sound amplifying her panic. By the time she reached the driveway, a scream rose in her throat, raw and urgent. "Stop! Don't turn it on!" And in that moment, the fragile world of control Dominic had built, his empire, his security, his life, suddenly felt breakable. The man feared by thousands turned to see the girl he loved most, small and trembling, trying to pull him back from an invisible edge. For the first time, Dominic realized that trust, above all, could be found in the most unexpected place, the heart of his own child. Dominic's hands shook as he led Alara away from the SUV, her small fingers clutching his sleeve like a lifeline. The compound, normally a fortress of calm and control, felt suddenly fragile, exposed. He glanced at the polished metal under the hood, a casual glance that sent a chill down his spine. He had seen countless threats, faced bullets and knives, survived assassins and rival families. But this was personal. This was betrayal from within. The bomb squad arrived moments later, a team Dominic had handpicked and paid handsomely for loyalty. They moved with the precision of professionals, but even their calm efficiency couldn't mask the tension in the air. Dominic watched them circle the vehicle, listening as the lead technician's voice cut through the morning quiet. "Sir, this is sophisticated. Timing device linked to ignition. One wrong move, and..." He didn't finish the sentence. Dominic didn't need him to. Rage flared first, hot and blinding, twisting in his chest. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. The man he had trusted above all others, the one who had stood at his side for years, had placed this trap. Then fear clawed its way in, cold and insistent. Not for himself. He could handle death, but for Alara. For the small, trusting creature who had run screaming across the driveway to save him. The thought of losing her, even for a heartbeat, ignited something raw and uncontainable. The squad worked quickly, the silence punctuated only by careful tools and Dominic's low, controlled breathing. He had sent guards to secure the perimeter, orders sharp and precise. No one leaves, no one enters, lockdown initiated. The gates clanged shut, surveillance cameras blinking alive, capturing every inch of the compound. Dominic moved like a shadow among them, eyes scanning, mind racing. Every possibility had to be considered, every access point scrutinized. Alara stayed close, peeking from behind his legs, eyes wide and alert. Dominic's voice softened, almost a whisper, though it carried authority. "Stay behind me. Do not move. Understand." She nodded, silent but determined, and he realized in that moment how much courage she carried despite her size, despite her age. The technicians finally stepped back, exchanging wary glances. "Device disarmed, sir," the lead said, voice tight with adrenaline. Dominic exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders just enough for a heartbeat of relief. But it didn't last. His mind immediately turned to the who and the why, the familiar icy calculation returning. Marcus. Of course it had to be Marcus. Every instinct, every history, every slight that had gone unnoticed now screamed his name. Dominic's hands tightened into fists, not from panic, but from the collision of fury and dread. The investigation had begun, and he would leave no stone unturned, no lie unexposed. Every man, every shadow, every whisper would be scrutinized. The betrayal was deep, personal, and dangerous, but Dominic Blackwell would not falter. Not now. Not ever. And as he led Alara back inside, the compound locked down around them, he realized that the war had already begun, not in some distant city street, but here, beneath the roof that had always been meant to protect them. Understory. Dominic summoned his inner circle to the study, the room heavy with the scent of polished wood and aged leather. The morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, but it did little to warm the tension that clung to the air. Each man and woman who entered knew the rules. Loyalty was expected, fear tolerated, mistakes punished. Today, however, Dominic would measure more than competence. He would measure trust. He seated himself at the head of the long mahogany table, eyes sweeping over the familiar faces. There was Rossi, the consigliere, calm and measured as always. Harlan, the security chief, muscles coiled beneath his tailored suit. And of course Marcus Vale, standing slightly apart, offering the polite, practiced concern that only those who had served long in Dominic's shadow could master. Dominic's voice was steady, almost casual. Something happened this morning. A threat, internal. I want to understand what went wrong and who might have seen it coming. His gaze lingered briefly on each of them, sharp and assessing, then returned to Marcus. Questions were asked, observations shared, but Dominic watched more than he spoke. He noted the subtle shifts, a twitch of an eye, a tightening of the jaw, hands brushing over polished surfaces in a gesture too deliberate to be unconscious. Marcus volunteered details first, speaking smoothly, his tone filled with outrage and concern on Dominic's behalf. But Dominic noticed what he had trained himself to see. Inconsistencies, micropauses that betrayed careful calculation. Rossi spoke next, offering a calm account of guard movements, personnel checks, and perimeter protocols. Harlan added technical details, the logistics of the morning, movements of vehicles, and staff. All seemed normal, competent, even flawless. Yet Dominic's instincts, a finely tuned machine honed over decades of danger, flickered toward Marcus. He leaned back, folding his hands over the polished table, letting silence stretch uncomfortably. I want everyone to be honest, he said, each word deliberate. If you see something unusual or suspect someone, speak now. His gaze landed on Marcus again. The slight hesitation, the subtle tightening around the eyes, the practiced concern, it was almost invisible. Almost. Dominic felt the familiar burn of anger rise, tempered by the need for control. He could not accuse, not yet. He needed evidence, certainty. Yet the seed had been planted, a whisper of betrayal taking root. Every detail now mattered. Every glance, every slip, every unexplained absence. He would watch, measure, and wait. Alara, tucked safely in a corner, watched her father move among these dangerous men. Even she could sense the tension, the quiet power struggle playing out in his gaze, in the room's charged silence. Dominic's eyes flicked toward her briefly, a small, almost imperceptible reassurance. Protecting her meant not only shielding her from immediate danger, but also reading the hearts of those she trusted him to guide. As the meeting drew to a close, Dominic rose, a mask of composure settling over him. The circle dispersed, returning to their routines, unaware that the first cracks had been noticed. Marcus had smiled, nodded, and left, but Dominic's mind did not let go. The investigation had begun in earnest. Every friend, every ally, could now be a threat. Every shadow could hide a dagger. And somewhere, Marcus waited, confident, calculating, unaware that Dominic Blackwell had already seen the first signs. Dominic retreated to the surveillance room, the hum of monitors and the soft clicking of keyboards filling the otherwise silent compound. The images flickered on multiple screens, each frame a frozen fragment of reality he had always controlled with ease. Now, he watched with a tightness in his chest he had not known before. Every shadow, every movement could hide a threat. Every smile could conceal betrayal. He fast-forwarded the footage from early that morning, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the driveway and garage. Guards moved as expected. Cameras caught the usual routines, yet one shadow drew his attention. A figure slipping along the side of the black SUV, careful, deliberate, almost casual. Marcus. The movement was subtle, a fleeting presence that could have been ignored by anyone else. Not by Dominic. His instincts flared, cold and sharp. He paused the frame, zooming in on Marcus's hands, the way he lingered near the hood, adjusting something unseen. Dominic's mind raced, piecing together every fragment he had noticed earlier. The betrayal he had suspected in the meeting had found a tangible form. The lieutenant he had trusted implicitly had not only conceived the threat, but had positioned himself perfectly to execute it. Dominic switched to the communications logs, fingers moving over the keyboard with precision born of years of practice. Marcus's phone activity was a trail of whispers and coded messages, lines connecting him to rival organizations, to men who would kill for him as soon as they were paid. The confirmation burned hot in Dominic's veins. This was not suspicion, not paranoia. This was a fact. Every beep, every ring, Every hidden call mapped a network of deception that had formed right under his roof. His hands clenched into fists as he leaned back in the chair. Rage and disbelief collided, but beneath it all, a steadier, sharper emotion guided him. Focus. Dominic had always been a man of control, a master of turning chaos into strategy. And now, this personal betrayal would be no different. He would dismantle it piece by piece, expose the traitor, and protect what mattered most, Elara. He replayed the footage again, frame by frame, memorizing every motion, every slight glance. Marcus had been careful, almost meticulous, but no one could completely erase themselves from the eyes of those trained to see everything. Dominic's mind cataloged, analyzed, plotted. Each revelation was a thread, and he intended to follow them all, pulling the web tight until the betrayer could no longer hide. The monitors reflected his darkening eyes, the room thick with tension. Outside, the compound lay quiet, unaware of the storm building within. Dominic rose, moving toward the door, every step measured, every thought precise. The investigation had begun in earnest, the line between ally and enemy now irrevocably blurred. Marcus had made his choice, and Dominic would respond with a certainty that left no room for error. The game was no longer abstract. It was immediate, personal, and deadly. The compound's corridors had grown cold and tense, each echo of footsteps a potential threat. Dominic moved with controlled precision, but his mind was split between strategy and fear, calculating who could be trusted while worrying over Elara's safety. She stayed close, silent, clinging to him like a shadow, unaware of the full scope of danger but sensing it nonetheless. Marcus had realized the investigation was closing in. His carefully constructed plan, designed to remove Dominic and seize power, now had a glaring vulnerability. The girl who had overheard too much. He would not fail. Not now. Not with everything on the line. Elara sat in the safe room, the door locked, guards stationed outside. Dominic had believed the space was impenetrable, the security airtight. Yet Marcus was cunning, and he had ways that went beyond brute force. A subtle disruption, a manipulated guard, a moment of distraction, enough to turn the fortress into a trap. The sound came first as a faint click at the door lock, nearly drowned out by the hum of the compound. Elara's eyes widened, instincts flaring. She darted behind a cabinet, heart hammering. The door shuddered, the lock giving way under skilled hands. Dominic's instincts screamed as he heard the commotion over his earpiece. Guards were already moving, but one had been compromised, distracted by a carefully staged incident. Marcus had slipped past their vigilance, a shadow among shadows, aiming for the girl. Time constricted to a single breath. Elara's small mind raced. She remembered the drills her father had run with her, the secret places, the signals he had taught her to use. She ducked, grabbed a small decorative bell, and rattled it frantically, a signal she knew the loyal guard outside would recognize. Steel boots responded immediately, the compromised guard swept aside, and Marcus's moment of advantage evaporated. Dominic arrived seconds later, heart pounding, fury burning through the fear. He saw Marcus retreating, a predator confronted with his prey turning against him. The calculated coldness, the arrogance, the assumption that he could touch the girl without consequence, all shattered in an instant. Dominic's fury was no longer abstract or tactical. It was personal. He reached Elara, gathering her into his arms, feeling her tremble, tiny and fragile, yet somehow indomitable. She had survived, not by luck, but by courage and instinct, qualities Dominic had always hoped to cultivate in her, never expecting they would be tested so brutally. Marcus had retreated, at least for now, leaving a trail of controlled chaos and provoked rage. Dominic's hands were clenched, his mind a storm of strategies and retribution. He would find Marcus, expose every betrayal, dismantle every plan, and ensure no threat came close to Elara again. For the first time, his fury was inseparable from his fear, his power intertwined with his love. The Empire could wait. The game could wait. Right now, nothing mattered but the girl who had run, hidden, and survived, and the man who would burn everything to protect her. Dominic led Alara to his private quarters, the room warm and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the compound. She stayed close, small hand gripping his sleeve, eyes wide and alert. Dominic closed the door behind them, the click of the lock a fragile promise of safety, though he knew no place was ever truly safe. He sank into the leather armchair, pulling Alara onto his lap. She rested against him, trusting, trembling, her small face upturned with questions she could not yet voice. Dominic took a deep breath, the weight of his empire and the burden of his choices pressing down on him. He had built walls around her life, kept her insulated from the darkness he commanded, but today had shown him that walls were never enough. "Do you know why some people hurt others, Alara?" he asked softly, his voice low but steady. She shook her head, biting her lip. "Sometimes, it's because they want what isn't theirs. Power, respect, control. They feel like the world owes them, and when it doesn't, they take it." Alara's eyes searched for him, trying to understand, and Dominic continued. "Marcus, he has been with me for a long time. I trusted him, believed in him, but he wanted something more than loyalty. He wanted my place, my power, and he thought the only way to get it was to hurt us. Hurt me." She shivered, the innocence of childhood clashing with the harsh reality he was revealing. "But why would he hurt you?" she whispered. Dominic's hand stroked her hair, the motion grounding both of them. "Because he thought he deserved it. He thought ambition could replace respect, fear could replace trust. And for years, I let him stay close, believing he could be loyal." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong." Alara's small fingers clenched the fabric of his shirt. "So, it's not just me who's in danger?" Her voice trembled. Dominic shook his head, kissing her temple. "No, love. It's all of us. Every choice I've made, every path I've taken, it brought danger here. Not because I wanted it, but because power is never free. Every empire has a price. Every crown carries a weight." She looked down, processing the enormity, the tension and fear she had only glimpsed before. Dominic's arms tightened around her, a silent promise. "But you are my reason to carry it differently now. You remind me that life isn't just about fear or respect or control. It's about love, protecting those who matter." Alara leaned into him, small and fragile, yet brimming with the courage that had saved them both. "I just want you to be safe, Papa," she whispered. Dominic's chest tightened, a mix of guilt, rage, and fierce protectiveness. "I know, little one, and I promise, I will do everything to make sure you are. That promise, it's heavier than any crown, but it's one I carry willingly." He held her there, letting the quiet settle between them, a momentary reprieve in a world ruled by betrayal, ambition, and power. For the first time that day, Dominic allowed himself to feel the weight not as an obligation, but as a bond that even the sharpest treachery could not sever. Dominic moved through the compound with quiet purpose, every step measured, every thought precise. The lockdown had transformed the familiar halls into a labyrinth of potential threats. He had spent the morning reviewing cameras, cross-referencing communications, and replaying every subtle gesture from his inner circle. Now it was time to act. The hunter would become the hunted. He set the trap with meticulous care, a subtle announcement that he would leave the compound, laced with details he knew Marcus would intercept. The security feeds showed the usual patrols, but Dominic had rerouted cameras to create blind spots, channels Marcus could not anticipate. Each motion he made was deliberate, calculated to provoke his lieutenant into revealing himself. Marcus, confident in his cunning, took the bait. He slipped through the shadows, moving with the practiced stealth of a predator, unaware that every step was being anticipated. Dominic watched from a secure vantage point, the tiniest smirk flickering across his face. This was no longer just about survival. It was about exposing the betrayal, bringing the traitor into the light. But Marcus was clever, perhaps more dangerous than Dominic had realized. As he approached the designated point, he struck first, cutting communications, disabling the security perimeter, and isolating Dominic from his loyal guards. The compound's usual order dissolved into chaos in an instant. Dominic felt the surge of adrenaline, the pulse of fear he had suppressed all morning, as he realized the trap had shifted. Now, Ilara's safety hung in the balance, dangling by a thread. Marcus emerged from the shadows, a dark silhouette against the flickering emergency lights. In his hand was a weapon, his expression a mixture of triumph and cold calculation. "I knew you'd play games," he said, voice low and threatening. "But you forget, you're not the only one who can anticipate moves." Dominic's jaw tightened. He had expected this confrontation, but not the audacity, not the immediate threat to the girl who had saved him. His mind raced, weighing options, calculating outcomes. Every second was precious, every decision a line between survival and catastrophe. He could not afford missteps, not now, not ever. Ilara, hidden behind a reinforced barrier, watched with wide, terrified eyes. She clutched the small charm Dominic had given her, the reminder of safety and trust, yet fear prickled at the edges of her courage. She knew Marcus's threat was real, that her father was alone, and that his usual invincibility could not protect her if he misjudged a single move. Dominic stepped forward, voice steady, controlled. "It ends here, Marcus. You chose this path. You chose betrayal." His words carried authority, but inside, his mind calculated every risk, every leverage point. The counter-trap was only partially revealed. Marcus had struck, but Dominic still held the advantage. Knowledge of the compound, knowledge of Marcus's arrogance, and the certainty that the game was far from over. The tension between them crackled in the air, a storm contained within the walls of Dominic's empire. Outside, the lockdown held, the compound silent, but for the unsteady rhythm of a war fought in shadows. The trap within the trap had begun, and both predator and prey understood that only one could leave the room unbroken. The room was tense, charged with a quiet electricity that made every heartbeat audible. Dominic faced Marcus, the distance between them heavy with years of unspoken grievances and the betrayal that had festered beneath the surface. Marcus held a gun loosely in one hand, confidence radiating from him as though the weapon alone made him invincible. Dominic's eyes, cold and unyielding, studied him, measuring not just the threat, but the man himself, the choices, the ambition, the corruption that had brought them to this moment. "You think this makes you king?" Dominic's voice cut through the silence, low and deliberate. "You think taking what isn't yours justifies the cost?" Marcus smirked, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, the first crack in the armor he had so carefully built. "Cost? You speak of cost, Dominic? Look around. This is the only world that matters. Power, control, fear. Everything else is a weakness." Dominic stepped closer, every movement precise, every breath controlled. "Power without loyalty, without conscience. It's meaningless. You've forgotten what it costs to rule. Not just money or territory, but your soul. Every life you manipulate, every hand you betray, every child you place in danger. It builds a kingdom of ashes." Ilara, hidden behind a reinforced corner, pressed herself against the wall, wide-eyed and trembling. She had seen the threats, the fear, the calculated moves, but now she saw the true weight of her father's choices. He had built this empire on fear, yes, but he had always tried to protect her, to shield her from the darkness. Today, she saw the shadows he had carried, the moral compromises, the quiet toll it demanded. Marcus's smirk faltered. "You always think you're the moral one," he hissed, voice rising. "The righteous. But look at yourself. How many have died for you? How many have bent the knee or broken under your command? Don't act like you're clean." Dominic's eyes narrowed, fury and sorrow blending into a sharp edge. "I am not clean. I never claimed to be. But I fight for something you'll never understand, the people I care about. You only fight for yourself. That's why you lose." In an instant, the tension exploded into action. Marcus lunged, weapon raised, the air charged with motion and danger. Dominic moved with the precision of a man who had faced death countless times, disarming, redirecting, and using Marcus's own momentum against him. The fight was brutal, physical, but beneath it lay the philosophical clash, the embodiment of ambition versus responsibility, fear versus loyalty, selfishness versus love. Alara watched, heart hammering, as the struggle unfolded before her. She understood now that her father's empire was not just a collection of wealth and influence. It was a constant negotiation with morality, a balance of protection and destruction. Each move he made was not just to survive, but to preserve the fragments of goodness that still mattered in a world built on violence. Finally, Marcus lay restrained, breathing hard, defeated not just by skill but by Dominic's unwavering understanding of consequence. The room fell silent, save for the labored breaths of father and daughter and the lingering weight of a lesson Alara would never forget. Power demanded a price, and only those who bore it with conscience could endure without losing themselves entirely. Alara had been quiet throughout the confrontation, pressed against the wall, eyes wide but calculating. Dominic had moved with lethal precision, dismantling Marcus's plans piece by piece, yet the girl had seen openings he had not. The small charm he had given her that morning, the one she had clutched like a talisman, suddenly sparked an idea, a way to tip the balance when all else seemed perilous. As Marcus struggled against the restraints Dominic had secured, he barked orders, threats, promises of vengeance. Dominic's fury had been relentless, but even he could not watch every angle at once. Alara acted swiftly, quietly retrieving a recorder from her father's desk, a device meant for emergencies, and pressed the button. Marcus's confession, every calculated word, every admission of treachery, was captured in full. She signaled to one of the loyal guards she had noticed earlier, a man whose subtle nod had already reassured her courage. With a whispered command, he slipped out and transmitted the recording to Dominic's secure network, ensuring that Marcus's betrayal was undeniable and witnessed by allies who had previously wavered. The tide shifted silently, invisibly, but decisively. Dominic, sensing the subtle change, adjusted his approach. Marcus's overconfidence, his assumption that chaos could conceal him, became his undoing. The guards moved in, coordinated and precise, cutting off every escape, every bluff. Marcus realized too late that brute force alone had outmaneuvered him, but by the cleverness of the very child he had underestimated. Alara stepped forward, small but resolute, her eyes meeting Dominic's. There was no fear, only fierce determination, the kind of clarity that only a child untouched by cynicism could wield. Dominic felt a swell of pride, tempered by a raw awareness of the stakes they had faced. She had saved him, yes, but more than that, she had reminded him why he fought, why he endured, and why he needed to redefine what power meant. Marcus was subdued, his rage impotent, his ambition shattered by both skill and truth. Dominic observed him carefully, considering the justice that would be meted out, but now tempered with a wisdom he had not possessed before. Revenge alone could not rebuild trust, nor could it erase the damage ambition had wrought. The empire would survive, yes, but it would do so differently. Tighter control tempered by loyalty, fear mitigated by respect, domination softened by understanding. Dominic knelt beside Alara, gathering her into his arms. "You saved more than me today," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You reminded me who I am supposed to be. Not just a monster, not just a boss, but your father. That matters more than anything." Alara hugged him back, small hands clutching at his shoulders. "I just did what I had to, Papa," she whispered. Dominic's gaze swept over the compound, the secured empire, the loyal guards, and the defeated traitor. Everything he had built was intact, yet everything had changed. In that quiet triumph, he understood that the true victory was not survival, not power, but the chance to be better, for her, for himself, for the fragile hope that even a monster could begin to redeem himself.